The Trump administration's simultaneous embrace of fake news as strategic communication policy and disparagement of mainstream news outlets as purveyors of fake news has put journalism in America in crisis. White House counselor Kellyanne Conway invented the story of a Bowling Green massacre. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer fabricated the story of a terror attack in Atlanta. At the same time, often on the same day, Trump fillets major news organizations for what he says is fake news. Has it ever been more difficult to tell fact from fiction? I sat down with 3 Barry communication professors to discuss this information crisis and what both journalism and consumers can do about it.
By your commitments. What are you committed to? What are you committed to doing, and how? And what are your commitments in terms of how you're going to go about doing that?
A big part of the onus for that is actually on teachers and professors. I know in 203, my basic communication class, just a few days ago, I taught credibility and how do you discern whether something is credible.
They should continue to strive to be loyal to truth-seeking, to finding out, well, what is the incontrovertible truth? What can we find corroboration for? What do we have evidence for? And continue to report the heck out of that.
Honestly, I think that journalists know how to demonstrate whether they're telling the truth or not. It's unfortunately that the American public is becoming very confused.
Even calling it fake news in some ways gives it too much credibility because it somehow groups it within the same organization as news. And so we need to differentiate that from actual news outlets that have a sense of the news that they're covering, that abide by policies of journalists, and that actually are trying to report the news.
How can consumers differentiate between credible and non-credible organizations?
It's all about being an educated news consumer, and nobody really wants to hear that because education automatically means that you have to actually do something, right? But we're educated consumers, hopefully, of advertisements, right? When we see an advertisement that says, if you click on this link, it's going to save you $1 million, then you don't click on the link because you know that's not true. And in the same way, you need to be a savvy consumer of news. And if the news article seems ridiculous, or if this news article doesn't seem to really ring true, then it's probably not.
Fake news gets paraded into our lives looking and smelling like real news. That's the only way it works. So that means that the onus is really on the consumer, the news consumer, the reader, the viewer, to distinguish fact from fiction, fake news from real news. And that, who has time to do that on a daily basis? B, who even wants to? I mean, there is a growing amount of evidence that the American public, or big portions of the American public, is fine with fake news. So the truth itself is kind of in play. And that goes back to this greater danger towards democracy. If that's true, then I don't really know where we go from here.
We have studies that demonstrate how many of us get our news from social media. And we don't bother to look at the news organization. We're just like, well, my friend sent this and it's correct. All of us need to be encouraged to do that, to look at things in different ways, to get out of our comfort zone. It's
very possible that this is the end of the world as we know it. Having said that, I hope that there's going to be some sort of shakeout, and that the bankruptcy of this way of getting information and making decisions based on information that you have no idea where it came from or how much of it is true, the bankruptcy of that in terms of a functioning democracy will become clear enough to enough people that there'll be a backlash to this backlash that demands fair, good, honest, truth-seeking journalism. But in my heart of hearts, I don't believe that's just over the horizon. I think it's going to be a while. And I don't know how much good journalism will die before we get to that place as a voting public.
This relates to the media's role in covering a White House that also seems confused about what constitutes truthful journalism.
Different media have reacted in different ways. There's been a lot of discussion about when and whether to use the word lie. to say whether Sean Spicer lied or Donald Trump lies about something. The New York Times used the word lie in a headline, but they didn't use it in association with the person themselves. So a lie was told, but not this person lied. NPR has made the decision that to lie specifically means that you are knowingly telling a falsehood in order to change perception. And since they can't ascribe whether somebody is really trying to mislead, they don't want to use the word lie, so they've used words like falsehood.
It's a challenge. I mean, and I think the risk this administration took in being so careless with the facts is that, you know, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater in a way. You're throwing out all of the good things that journalism does by casting aspersions and tainting the Fourth Estate with accusation after accusation, the contempt that Spicer is showing from the White House towards a media called to hold that power accountable. That's a terrible risk for democracy. It may work as it did work as a short-term strategy to gain the White House, but for the health of our democracy, it's just very destructive.
I think that it magnifies the importance of our journalists exponentially. Just today, it came out that Flynn was asked to resign. The White House admitted it was because of pressure put on them by the press. And for those of us that value the truth, there is a truth. And I think that is being denied, and journalists are saying, no, we will find it, and they have found it, and they are making a difference.
That's all journalism can do. It's not journalism's mission or goal or obligation to correct the imbalances caused by this administration. Their loyalty is to the truth.
I think deciding not to use someone as a source is a valid reaction. As a journalist, you know, when I worked as a journalist, you live or die by your sources. And if you can't trust your source to actually give you credible information, then that source doesn't have value. And so there's been a lot of discussions, for instance, with Sean Spicer about whether to carry press conferences live, or do you instead record the press conference, fact check, and then play the press conference with the facts checked. That seems almost unimaginable that you would necessarily have to do that, but in an administration that seems more than willing to just make up facts off the cuff, that may be the reaction that the press has to take.
The positive note would be that it's a line from Men in Black when Will Smith is seated on the bench with Tommy Lee Jones, and Will Smith's character says, how could people not know that there are all these aliens that look like humans in New York City? And Tommy Lee Jones's character responds, people are stupid. They've always been stupid. Individuals are smart. And our hope has always been with smart individuals who act on their convictions. I do have hope in that.
With Viking Fusion, I'm Sarah O'Carroll.